Objective. Objective priorities were fixed. Neutralize Temple defenders, seize the Grand Hall, security nexus, and the communications beacon. Lock the archives, then clear all wings, spires, and sublevels. Neutralize covered any combat-capable Jedi, Temple guards, or staff actively resisting. Creche areas were flagged for controlled clearing after primary nodes fell. Ground command was Darth Vader, formerly Anakin Skywalker, with clone commander Apo leading 5-0 First Elements. Apo assigned sectors to company and platoon leaders. Coruscant Guard units handled outer cordons and post-seizure security, not the initial push. The assault detachment was a battalion-scale spearhead, DC-15A/DC-15S as standard rifles, DC-17 sidearms, limited heavy repeaters, breaching charges, electrobinders, and stun ordnance. Jet troopers and marksmen were held to counter vertical escapes and gantry leaps. LAAT/I gunships moved troops from Senate district pads under valid Republic YFF to avoid friendly interdiction. Temple geometry shaped the plan. Southern Grand Steps to the Grand Hall, central core with archives, security nexus, lifts, dedicated beacon tower, council spire above, flanking wings for healing, quarters, creche, gardens. Service shafts throughout. Internal defenses relied on checkpoints, blast doors, and Temple Guard patrols. The operation ran in 4 phases. Isolate the site, decapitate command and control nodes, secure archives and silence, or redirect the beacon. Then conduct grid sweeps through all sectors. Initial isolation used Coruscant Guard soft cordons and sky lane diversions. 2 insertions followed, a frontal push up the Grand Steps and a concurrent breach via upper maintenance apertures and auxiliary hangars to prevent a single choke point defense. Collateral damage was minimized to preserve archives and limit public panic. Tactics against Jedi emphasized angles and control. Squads advanced in staggered files, built overlapping crossfires, and used flashbangs to break deflection rhythm. Doors, lifts, and power were manipulated to trap or split defenders. Shielded elements absorbed first contact, while marksmen engaged during movement exposures. Early control targets were the beacon and security nexus to prevent a temple-wide warning and automated lockouts. Clone slicers secured consoles under guard. A dedicated wedge reached the archives, with binders prioritized to preserve staff for data access. Tripod gunners covered portals against last-second charges. Council spire approaches were contained rather than rushed. Clamp lift cars, advanced stairwells with shields, and task marksmen to engage mid-leap. Vader personally broke hardpoints, so assault wedges didn't stall, and reallocated reserves as new ducts or escape routes appeared. Rules of engagement were explicit. Any lightsaber wielder equals immediate lethal threat. Any display of telekinesis or blaster deflection equals force-capable hostile. Any console purge/cycle under combat equals engage to preserve control. Creche and Medbay locations were called in for timed clearing once primary nodes were secure. With the Grand Hall, Centerline, Beacon Room, and a vertical axis captured, reserves flowed into held portals. Apo converted seized doors into firing bases, locked systems to clone codes, and shifted tempo to systematic room-by-room sweeps. Grand Hall fight. Entry used a minimal damage breach. Council codes first. When locks held, Vader cut along a segmented seam, while engineers placed shaped charges on the locking shoes only. The result was a narrow portal that preserved sightlines and avoided debris traps. 2 mirrored stacks entered with a shield pair up front, a breacher, then gunners. Flashbangs and a smoke pop were timed with the final door, so clones could build diagonal crossfires into the nave and deny a straight rush. Temple guards tried to pin the funnel with saber pikes, while knights struck from balconies and colonnades. Clones countered by herding with suppressive streams just off the blade path, then snapping to short, irregular bursts that forced constant re-aiming. Thermal visors beat smoke. Jedi deflection degraded at distance, pushing them to close. Vader broke hardpoints. He advanced behind shields, bound and turned a pike to collapse its reach, then pivoted to the most mobile flanker. Removing the anchor and the outrider let assault wedges step to the next floor marker without losing firing geometry. Casualties were dragged back to the threshold, not treated in the aisle. Leaders called color-coded reference points for instant orientation when a Jedi displaced by leap or shove, keeping multiple rifles pre-aimed on likely vectors. A control team seized the security nexus, cancel auto-seals, clamp lift cars mid-level, and freeze fire suppression routines. Consoles were chained to clone IFFs and held under rifle guard to prevent remote recapture. A beacon team reached the comms deck via maintenance passages, cut external transmit, forced local echo, and posted a permanent guard. This denied any system-wide recall or scatter message during the fight. Side galleries were denied, with tripod repeaters at mouths and marksmen on second tiers. Shooters engaged on movement only. Balcony-to-floor drops were hit at arc apex, with stun mines covering common landing stones. Rules of engagement stayed strict. Lightsaber equals lethal authorization. Force use or console tampering under fire equals immediate engagement. Non-combatants were bound and routed past shields when feasible, otherwise marked for later clearing. With the Nave stabilized and Nexus and Beacon secured, Apo converted doors, consoles, and balconies into controlled portals, denial points, and nests. Reserves flowed through held portals, and the assault shifted to segmented clears of the archives, corridor, dojos, and initial residential stacks. Archives, corridor, seizure, and data control. Assault wedges split at the Nave to take the archives corridor from both ends, denying a single defensive line. Tripod repeaters covered door mouths, while a slicer pair advanced under shield to the primary console bank. Archivists attempted lockdowns, data purge triggers, stack isolation, and hollow stack power cuts. Slicers prioritized 3 counters, freeze purge routines, mirror live stacks to a clone secured buffer, and revoke Jedi admin tokens in real time. Door control was flipped from proximity permissions to clone IFFs, preventing defenders from cycling blast doors to split squads. Any console used under fire was treated as a combat node. Operators were stunned or restrained on contact. Shelving aisles created long sightlines favorable to deflection at range. Clones broke lines with portable shields set in zigzag, forcing defenders to expose on every aisle transition. Stun mines were seated at cross-aisle stones to punish lateral bursts. Holocrons and sensitive stacks were cased immediately. A tag team logged crate IDs tied to nav charts, council minutes, and war intel, preventing loss to the chaos of fighting. Carry-out paths were guarded to stop last-second recapture attempts. If a Jedi used telekinesis to rip stacks or projectors free, gunners aimed at the object, not the wielder, to break control and drop debris short. This kept aisles passable and avoided pinning squads behind collapsed shelving. With purge frozen and admin revoked, the corridor became a controlled artery. Reserves flowed through to deeper stacks. The original assault team pivoted to guard consoles and escort high-value media to a secure staging alcove. Once the archives were stable, Apo marked the sector Hold and Filter. No one entered without clone escort. Any survivor routed here was detained for later interrogation, tied to data access keys. Master-level engagements. Lift cars to the Council Spire were clamped mid-run, forcing stairwell ascents under shield. Stair teams rotated every landing to prevent fatigue and maintain steady rifle arcs into each turn. Masters with high dual capability attempted vertical displacement across gantries and inner shafts. Marksmen engaged at takeoff and apex, the 2 moments when blade stance is least stable. Shield pairs held stairs to block rushes. Ray shields were not available. Instead, doors were hard-locked behind advances to stop backflow. If a master slipped past a landing, squads executed a turn and box. 2 files reversed, 1 held stairs, 1 sealed the nearest corridor with a repeater. Vader took point at hardpoints. His sequencing mirrored the Nave. Break the anchor first, often a guard with the best positional control, then pivot to the most mobile threat. This prevented clones from being fixed while exposed. Environmental controls were seized at each intermediate level to keep lights steady and air clear. Smoke favors defenders who can sense movement without relying on optics. Consistent lighting kept deflection timing predictable for gunners. The Council antechamber was treated as a last-ditch rally space. Entry used twin breaches offset by 1 second to split defender attention, followed by a shield push to the center rug to deny circular flanking runs around the perimeter. Any symbolic items, recording pedestals, council hollows, were tagged but left in place during contact to avoid clutter. Once the chamber was clear, items were logged for removal under guard, not during active movement. With the spire under control, stairwells were converted into choke point ladders with interlocked fields of fire, preventing late counterattacks from reoccupying upper levels. Training dojos and anti-Jedi countermeasures. Dojo floors are wide, polished, and bordered by weapon racks, ideal for agile duelists. Clones roughened approach lanes with grip compound to stabilize shield pairs and reduce slide when absorbing close strikes. Engagements began with flashbangs thrown high to detonate above eyeline, minimizing reflection from the floor. Gunners then fired short, non-rhythmic bursts to prevent a defender from settling into a predictable deflection cadence. Net launchers and stun cable darts were used only when a defender was isolated by geometry, corner, column, or rack, so that cable angles could be stacked. Random launches in open space were avoided. A single cut freed the target and wasted tempo. Weapon racks were secured first to deny improvised projectiles. If a Jedi tried telekinetic throws, gunners targeted the moving object to spoil trajectory, not the wielder. Shields absorbed stray returns as wedges advanced 2 steps at a time. A mirror and pinch tactic was standard. One file mirrored footwork at standoff to hold attention. A second file pinched from oblique with a shield ram to collapse balance. Once down, binders went on immediately, no grappling allowed. In multi-target dojos, squads designated a spinner, the most active mover, and a pillar, the static anchor. Vader engaged the pillar. Marksman and shield pairs focused on containing the spinner long enough for massed stun. Once floors were held, training droids were powered down and caged to prevent surprise activation. Dojo doors were then left open, with repeaters facing inward, turning the rooms into low-risk zones that did not need retaking. Residential wings. Residential stacks were cleared in spirals. Outer corridor, room pair, cross corridor, next ring. This prevented leapfrogging defenders from slipping behind squads through private connectors. Doors were opened by code or cut at the lock plate only, keeping rooms intact for fast visual sweeps. Anyone armed or accessing panels during contact was treated as a combatant. Compliant occupants were bound and moved to collection points. Creche sectors were flagged before entry. A shield wall held the corridor while a small team conducted quick, no-delay searches. Closets, crawl spaces, vents. Rooms were marked cleared only when vents were sealed and hatches tied off. Temple staff attempting to relocate younglings during live fire were intercepted and routed the shortest path to a controlled hallway. If fighting persisted nearby, teams bypassed and returned once adjacent sectors stabilized. Med droids and caretakers were immobilized at stations to prevent alarm relays via internal comms. Movement paths were designated with glow markers, so replacement squads could follow the same secure route without researching each room. Any powered consoles in living quarters were cut at the breaker after a snapshot of open files, preventing delayed triggers or remote doors opening behind squads. Cleared halls were converted into safe lanes for detainee movement, one-way flow, armed overwatch at intersections, and no cross-traffic with assault teams, avoiding jams that stall forward elements. Halls of healing and medbay control. Medbays presented dual risks: access to sedatives and environmental controls that can fog entire corridors. The first action was to lock suppressant and anesthetic dispensers at the manifold, not just at bedsides. Surgical suites were entered with shields and visors. Bright surgical lights were kept on to deny shadow play. Any console activity under fire was stopped. Displays were imaged and power was cut at the panel. Wounded Jedi received the same rules of engagement as active defenders if they attempted force use or console access. Otherwise, they were restrained and monitored, with med droids retasked under clone supervision to maintain life support for later processing. Corridors were kept clear of rolling carts and gurneys to maintain firing lanes. Duplicate equipment was staged in side rooms to reduce clutter and prevent sudden projectile use. Clone casualty stations were set one sector behind the front, never in the main medical bay, to keep resources from becoming a single high-value target. Drag lines routed through stairwells, not lifts, in case of power cuts. Once medical control was stable, staff were assigned to detainee triage under guard, creating a controlled flow that didn't interfere with assault teams and minimized re-clears of the same rooms. Sublevels, sublevel access points, service lifts, ducts, and waste shafts were mapped from the security nexus. Teams sealed non-critical shafts with foam and mag clamps, leaving only monitored routes open. Jet troopers were committed here, not at the Nave, to chase vertical retreats through maintenance chimneys and to interdict roofline to hangar jumps. Their role was pursuit and marking, with ground squads executing the final capture. Auxiliary hangars were treated as escape engines. Doors were locked open to prevent crush hazards. Then landing zones were covered by crossed repeaters and a marksman pair aiming at cockpit glass and cockpit canopies. Ships were disabled by pulling power couplings and tagging nav comps, not by blaster fire to avoid fires. If a defender reached a cockpit, a stun mine under the access ladder provided a last-ditch denial. Utility droids were corralled to stop automated door cycles and vehicle towing during contact. Maintenance consoles were slaved to clone IFFs, so no remote door opened behind a squad mid-sweep. With sublevels sealed and hangars inert, the lower temple could no longer serve as an escape or reinforcement vector for defenders elsewhere. Management. Outside, the Coruscant Guard maintained soft and hard cordons. Pedestrian barriers, redirected sky lanes, and patrol lines masked as a Senate security drill. This kept bystanders away and preserved clean withdrawal lanes. LAATS orbited on staggered racetracks to deconflict fire and dust. A forward arming and refuel point was set on a nearby secured pad to rotate squads without deranging the plaza approach. Media droids and civilian recorders were intercepted by traffic control nodes. Flagged feeds were quarantined under emergency authority to prevent real-time broadcast of troop positions. Any Jedi attempting to burst through the outer cordon met overlapping arcs from shock troopers with riot shields and repeaters. Stun nets were preferred outside to avoid stray fire across urban traffic. Evac routes for detainees used covered ground vehicles with escort bikes. Movement windows were time-boxed to prevent platoon-level gaps inside the temple, while transfers occurred. Post-assault occupation. After the final active contacts, squads executed a cold grid. Every room rechecked with power off, doors wedged, vents sealed, and console breakers down. Any new heat signatures triggered immediate resweep. Lightsabers, holocrons, and council seals were collected and logged with chain of custody tags. Med records, temple rosters, and entry logs were imaged and mirrored to secure buffers for later analysis. Bodies were documented in place, then moved to designated bays to clear lines of movement. This prevented later confusion about where engagements occurred and kept corridors open. The beacon, previously silenced to external space, was prepped for recall message deployment under Vader's order. Later, surviving Jedi countermanded this with a warning broadcast. Control of the tower stayed under clone guard throughout. Garrison posts were established at the Nave, Nexus, Archives, and Spire access points. Each post owned door controls, local comms, and a marksman nest, ensuring no sector could be retaken without crossing two fields of fire. With sectors locked, Apo reported the temple secure, transitioned to occupation procedures, and began detainee processing and asset transfer under Central Command Authority.